Well, thanks for joining us today. We got some hot topics for you. We're going to give you some insights into some of the main things happening in the news at home and abroad, things you won't often hear in terms of the insights from mainstream media. We're going to talk about bans today. There's a lot of interesting discussion, TikTok bans and forest fire bans. We're even going to talk about a Melania ban and some other things that are catching people's attention. So let's jump right away and look at this issue in Canada regarding the TikTok ban. It's coming up. And we have a situation where the Canadian government wants to ban TikTok from operating in Canada. The leader of the opposition, Pierre, is saying, well, let's do a somewhat restrictive ban. Let's ban on the use of government devices and have politicians being banned from using it on their devices. A lot of concern in the artistic community, and rightly so, because a lot of artists get their start on TikTok and they get noticed and can really move some of their products through. And it's not just artists, but others also. So is it really that huge of a problem when a 12-year-old can tap into the Pentagon and get all of the secrets there? And we're concerned that the Chinese government is going to somehow tap into some of the things that we're looking at. Yes, some areas of concern, but we're encouraging people, take a overall close look at this. And we'd say to the federal government here in Canada, it'd be great to hear you, the federal government, Prime Minister Carney, talking to China about banning, for instance, the precursors, the chemicals that are used in the manufacture of fentanyl, which kills thousands of young Canadians a year. How about standing up and being tough on that? Maybe not so much on banning TikTok across the board. Let's see where that goes. Very interesting to see the reaction that's going on across the country. Again, in Canada, we've got a couple of premiers who have banned hiking in their provinces because there's forest fires. And of course, we're all concerned about forest fires, and rightly so. We also know the vast or the majority of forest fires are human started, sometimes by accident, but we also know there's an increasing number of these forest fires, not just in Canada, but we see it happening in the US and other places that are being started deliberately by arsonists. And interesting, they are very rarely named. It's one thing, it's an important part of the criminal justice process that people are named who are doing this, and also that the very significant penalties associated with purposely starting a forest fire would be also publicized as a deterrent. Forest fires, we don't have to go into great detail, kill people, kill thousands and thousands of hectares and acres and square miles, pollute the atmosphere and everything else. And it seems like the arsonists get very comparatively light sentencing for their crimes. But boy, oh boy, we're really going after the hikers. Someone in Nova Scotia just got fined $25,000 for taking a hike. Maybe we should take a hike on the policies, and not so much the policies themselves, but here's why. We're seeing people in mainstream media saying, well, why won't people just obey the government? Why won't they just listen and accept everything the government says? Part of the reason that governments find themselves offside when they impose these types of bans, whether it's this type of ban or other things, they are often seen, at least it's in the view or the mind of the public, that they're not taking into consideration whatever might be the other side of the discussion or the other side of the debate. They're even not willing, in many cases, where they're bringing in bans, whether it's on substances or whether it's on taking a hike, not seen to be considering scientific evidence that invariably is also on the other side of whatever the argument is. There's still a lot of debate on whether there actually is there are more forest fires these days or not, and best ways to deal with them. For instance, government's putting a lot more money into drone research capabilities so that fires can be spotted quickly. And we all know that dealing with a forest fire, you best are dealing with it when you can hit it fast, when you get first responders out there. That's going to require more science and technology. Some of these areas of forest management need to be looked at, and maybe not so much just telling people quit hiking because that's not going over well. So it's the government's responsibility to be seen as listening, to be seen as considering both sides of a debate before they implement some of these bans. Think about it. The other area where we're seeing bans in Canada is, of course, the ongoing movement to on companies to ban anything that they are doing in any way, shape, or form with Israel. And you see it in the so-called divestiture movement. And lately, what's coming up is there's a prize in Canada that's given once a year for fictional writing. It's called the Giller Prize. Boy, this is really getting stretched out now. That particular organization obviously has to have a bank, and they bank with one of the banks in Canada. And that particular bank helps out, has been seen as having as a client a Canadian manufacturer of high-tech goods. The Canadian organization is called Calian. And one of the things they make are antennae, and they ship them all around the world, these antennae that go on GPS systems. And they have customers in Israel. And there's a possibility that maybe some in Israel are using these antennae for their various military purposes. And so the protesters, the ones who hate anything to do with Israel, are up in arms, and they get people all fired up. And they're putting pressure on the bank in Canada that deals with the Giller Foundation, which has some kind of association ongoing with this particular company. And they're saying just shut it all down. That's getting a lot of people upset. Oh, by the way, these groups that are saying that the Canadian banks should not be dealing with any of these companies are also saying that the very successful book selling company called Indigo, and they sell all the full range of books and literary products that you would expect in any world acclaimed book selling operation. And they're saying just ban Indigo altogether. And they're going after the banks who deal with Indigo. And oh, guess what? The CEO of Indigo is, yeah, you guessed it, a Jew, a Jewish person. So I think it's time we did some pushback on this and say to these groups that are calling for divestiture, it would be somewhat balancing or comforting to even once hear that they are doing something about the Canadian funding through the Canadian government of the UN group called UNRWA, the United Nations Work Relief Agency, which is a direct, not just a direct funder of Hamas, but they fund the education programs of Palestinian children from the age of 5. And you can go and check this out on a documentary I did on this. Go to stockwellday.com. Check out my documentary on Israel after October 7th. These groups, funded by UNRWA, funded by the Canadian government, are teaching 5 and 6-year-olds that the greatest thing they can be doing is to kill a Jew, and teaching them how to hold a knife and how to slash the throat of a Jewish person. So, these groups are saying that we should divest. Let's not sell, let's go after any company that's selling even something like antenna into Israel. Let's go after them, but never hear a word, not a peep out of these groups for the funding that goes to Hamas, which is committed in their written constitution to kill all Jews everywhere, all the time, and to evaporate the country of Israel, not go for a two-state solution, not a solution for peace. This is what Hamas is. UNRWA funds Hamas. Canadian taxpayers are forced to fund UNRWA. How about that being also considered by some of these groups who are saying we should shut down organizations like the Giller Foundation and an entire bank because of its activities? Let's give that a little fairness in terms of the debate. There's another, you could call it a ban that's just come up in the last couple of days. Not quite a ban, But very interesting. We're all quite familiar with something called Trump derangement syndrome. And whatever you think or feel about Donald Trump, it is known that really, and I certainly, for one, do not agree with every policy he has ever come out with. But there's this huge, it's not just a tendency, but a matter of fact, this fixation never to say, it wouldn't matter what he did or as president, if even if something recognized globally as being positive, that you can't mention it. You cannot say on a particular policy or thing that the man has done anything good. Well, that seems to be by mainstream media extending to the first lady, to his wife, Melania, in terms of either being ignored or attacked by mainstream media when she does something pretty significant historically in terms of being the first lady. And so this recent, just in the last couple of days, the revelation that she wrote a letter to President Putin, and she is appealing him to stop the war, to stop the killing, and mainly from the point of view of the suffering of children on both sides, thousands and thousands, whether it's deaths, whether it's children being deported, whether it's children being captured. And so she's appealing for him to please at least consider the children. Her reaching out and doing that, it got panned by the entire mainstream media. They can't stand the thought that she's doing something productive. It's been very well received around the world, what she's done. But there's something about mainstream media that they are especially vicious, not just against small c conservatives, but against a woman who would be seen as doing anything that might even smack of being small c conservative. To tell you the truth, I don't know the political leanings. Obviously, she's Republican, of the First Lady, but on all issues. But even on something like this, where you have the First Lady, historically, I don't know that it's happened before in history, appealing to a warring leader, to Putin, saying, think about the children. And she can't even get a positive note from mainstream media on that. And there's been a response just now from the First Lady of Ukraine, from President Zelensky's uh, wife. And she is saying, her name is Olena Zelensky. She wrote a letter back to Melania Trump, the First Lady of the United States, thanking her for her intervention, praising her for taking such a step. And again, can you get one positive note, whether it's from the uh, outrageously unrighteous CBC leftists or the BBC or CNN? You can't. They can't say anything positive about that. There was another incident 2 weeks ago that was reported in some media in terms of the effect that Melania is having on Donald Trump. And you may have seen the story where he says, and he admits, there'd been a bit of a tone where he wasn't praising Putin as much after every time he had a phone call with him. He was asked by this in the media, and they said, "You're not quite as praiseworthy of President Putin after your phone call." And what's that all about? And President Trump said, "Well, I was the other night. I went home. I was telling Melania I had a great call with Putin, and she said, 'Do you notice?'" She said this to President Trump. She said, "Do you notice that right after every time you say you had a great call with Putin, he launches another attack and kills more people?" Now, that's the wife of the President of the United States, kind of giving him a pretty straight on pushback in terms of him talking about how great these calls are with Putin. And he changed in doing that. Again, any credit to Melania Trump? No, no. The mentally deranged, it would seem, intellectually incapable left is seems to be not just reluctant but incapable of acknowledging something that might be positive. Which brings me to Pierre, the leader of the official opposition in Canada. He's just won a by-election with over 80% of the vote. And right away, you have mainstream media who are actually saying at one point, even just a few days ago, that if he didn't get like 80%, he should resign. And when you look at in the last federal election, uh, Mark Carney, who is now prime minister, when he ran in his riding, with huge support from media for the entire campaign, mainstream media drooling over him at rates of drool, the drool level at rates we haven't seen probably since they fell over in a swoon over Justin Trudeau in 2015. So even with huge media support, the wind is in the sails for Mr. Carney, and he got 63% in his riding, which is a good turnout. They were saying Pierre Poilievre would have to resign if he didn't get 80. Well, he did get over 80%. And so now all they can say is, now you better be nice, Pierre Poilievre. You better talk nice. You better talk in beautiful, soft tones. You know, it's kind of hard for, and I can tell you this as a former leader of the opposition, it's not easy to talk nicely when you see policies that are hurting your country, when you see policies that are hurting working families and working Canadians. So I don't know how nice he's going to be, but it's kind of fascinating. And I wonder if mainstream media is concerned because when Pierre Poilievre was relentless for 2 years, not being nice about the carbon tax, that eventually moved public opinion. And you saw under that public opinion moving against the carbon tax, first Justin Trudeau dropping it, and Mark Carney, the new prime minister, also dropping it. So is mainstream media concerned that when Pierre Poilievre gets relentless about something and focused on something, it actually moves the public mind? Is that really what they're concerned about? Now, I don't think any leader, Pierre Poilievre included, should just be blasting away and being angry all the time. Give credit where credit is due. Prime Minister Carney has said, and we're going to tell, he's going to be tested on this, that he's going to drastically reduce the size of the federal government service. This is something that Pierre Poilievre was suggesting was going to happen when he was running in the election. And of course, he got mercilessly beaten up by the Liberals and all of their mouthpieces in media for even suggesting that the federal government service would have to be reduced in size. Now Mark Carney is saying it. This is a usual Liberal pattern, just to watch what the Conservatives are saying, and if anything, there are any other policies are getting traction, just follow it. So now Mark Carney is saying he is going to really significantly reduce the size of public service. That's a whole other issue. So interesting to see where these things go, and are they really concerned, is mainstream media really concerned that if Pierre Poilievre gets relentless on things, it's actually going to move public opinion? Things like violent crime, for instance, which mainstream media, they hate the thought of violent criminals being facing significant jail time, etc. They hate those kind of thoughts. So give credit where credit is due, Mr. Poilievre, but hey, don't be nice if it's something that is hurting Canada and hurting Canadians. We'll see what happens on that front. On the culture front, as we know, J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, the BBC right now is in the midst of producing the new series on Harry Potter, and they are using J.K. Rowling, as they should, as the executive director of that, and it's getting huge popularity. People love that series, in spite of the fact that the LGBTQ plus community is really against J.K. Rowling, have wanted her to be banned and suggesting her book should be banned because of her stated opinion that she feels men are men and women are women, and you can't say you're a woman if you're born a man and you had your genitals removed, for instance. So she's taken that position and run into huge attacks from the LGBTQ community, notably not from the gay community, but from the LGBTQ community. And now this new series coming out with BBC, interestingly, looking like it's very popular. So it seems like on the culture front, if you are willing to stand up and say what you believe and take on what you think are these media forces that will destroy you if you dare question something like gender, J.K. Rowling proving not necessarily the case. There's been an interesting development in terms of, if you want to call this a culture feature, uh, there's something called Bieber-gate going on right now. And there's this guy out there who, by the name of Dylan Declos, and apparently he's made quite a name for himself being able to impersonate Justin Bieber. It's taken on new heights when just over the weekend he showed up without the shirt on and lots of tattoos and the hat on backwards. And he had an entourage with him to make it look like he was Justin Bieber. And he waltzed into a big resort in Las Vegas. They even invited him to come up on the stage to the delight of thousands of fans, and he sang a couple of Bieber songs. Apparently, he sounds just like Justin Bieber, and even ran up a $10,000 bar bill before they found out, hey, this is not Justin Bieber. So I guess the trappings of fame that some of us never have to worry about, but there you go. Watch out for Bieber-gate and these other issues. Look forward to catching up with you tomorrow. Thanks again for tuning in.